Here are some more tips for customizing the interface, and I'll start with the marking menus. Previously we added Pick Component, and this has an option box on this square. So instead of picking everything, I could limit it to just picking curves. But for that to work properly on a marking menu, then I need to do a control double click and rename the tool, so that it appears on the menu as just curve. Now I'm just going to move that to a different position, and I'll move the spacer too, so that it matches the position on the default marking menu. And now if I wanted Pick Surface as well, I can bring the Pick Component tool on again with the middle mouse button, and that's the position I want. But I just need to get rid of this spacer, so I'll drag it into the trash. So I then need to rename it again, so I'll do control double click and call it Surface. And then I can set it up in the option window to just selecting surfaces only. So that then gives me Pick Curve and Pick Surface. So I'll just save those changes using the right mouse button. And because I've started customizing it, I'll give it a new name. But I want to focus on the main shelves, which we started to use earlier in this section. And so far I've already added the edit point curves, and I've included here degree 5 and 7 as well. So let's say that I wanted to add the CV curve tool to that as well. But you notice that it's on a submenu. So I need to be careful here, because if I use my middle mouse button at the top level and drag that onto my shelf, I get the whole menu. Now this can be useful, and if it's what you want, then it's fine. But if I only wanted the single tool, then I need to remember to open the menu first, and then drag the single tool across with my middle mouse button. We can also use a shelf for tools that are on submenus. So for example, the Curve Stretch tool takes a moment to find on the pull-down menu. So I can take that onto my shelf so that I can access it directly. And also there are tools that are separated. So the Curve Curvature locator down here we'll always use with curves, so we can bring it together with the other curve tools on the shelf. And don't forget that you can use the shelf extras as punctuation to organize your shelf by separating different sections of tools. And then with tools like the keypoint curves, which come in a separate window, we've got two options. I could use the middle mouse button at the tab at the top and drop that on top of one of the tabs in my shelf. And then I get all these tools spread out onto this new shelf. Alternatively, I can drag that into the trash with my middle mouse button, and then just drag on the individual tools that I've used so far. And it's entirely up to you. Some of the other tools we've used work on both curves and surfaces. So for example, Detach. So I could take that onto the shelf as well. But this shelf here is looking like it's becoming just a curves shelf. So I could instead just rename that tab to Curves. And if I do that, you notice that it gets called Curves number 3, and that's because we already have a shelf called Curves. So I might just choose to change the name a bit so that I don't have that added number. So now I could create a new shelf by using the right mouse button to get the menu and choosing New Shelf. And I'll just call that General for now. And if I open that one, then I could drag on the Detach tool from the pull-down menu. And then there's the Extend tool, which is useful in two ways. So I might use it first with Merge set to On. And so just drag it onto my shelf and then rename it. And then I can have another version with the Merge set to Off. And this works fine as long as I'm careful to give them different names. And then finally, the Symmetry tools were useful. And people often get confused as to which one is which. So you could, for example, give them your own names that help you to remember what they're for. And if you want to reorder the shelves, just use your middle mouse button on the Shelf tab. So you can see how it's possible to gradually build up your personal shelves as you learn new tools. So I'll save that shelf set and I'll just give it the same name as before. And then I can dock that down at the bottom using the Shift key. And then finally I need to save my preferences. But before I do that, I'm going to go into Utilities and use Tool Resets, because I will have made changes to some of my palette and menu tool options, and I don't want those saved. So I can just reset them before I then go and save all my preferences. And that means that when I exit Alias and come back in, all my changes will be there. So there's more information on customizing your marking menus and shelves on the Quick Tips documents on the training site. But the most important things to remember is to use the middle mouse button to drag your tools onto the shelf, and then use Control double click to rename tools and shelves.